Good morning on this Sunday, February 2nd, and welcome to a very packed Georgia gang. Two more major candidates enter Senate race number 2. It's a shakeup on the Republican side, and perhaps a new frontrunner emerges on the Democratic side. The FAA issues another subpoena in the investigation into Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. And for the first time in more than 2 decades, Gwinnett County will have a new sheriff. Theron, Phil, Janelle, and Kathy Woolard are all here. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia gang starts now.
We call it Senate race number 2. What a difference a week makes. Republican-appointed Senator Kelly Loeffler now has 2 more opponents, Republican Doug Collins and Democrat Raphael Warnock. Let's begin on the Republican side as we hear from Congressman Doug Collins, who announced that he's running on Fox and Friends.
Georgia's in a state that is a wonderful state that's growing, has a lot of new ideas and a lot of new people coming in. And they need to see the conservative values that actually believe in people, that actually coming from being a state trooper's kid and working as a pastor and being an Air Force chaplain, to actually say conservative values like First Step Act, criminal justice reform, putting people in places where they can succeed at all areas of life, and doing that from a perspective of saying, you know, we've worked hard every day in our life to make what we have, but also making sure that Georgia, when they come here, they realize that the conservative values of the state of Georgia is what made it great, and I want to continue to take that throughout the entire state.
All right, Phil, we're going to start with you because I can't wipe the smiles off Theron and Kathy's faces about this announcement. But how does this move not tear the Republicans apart?
Well, what happens, it's like both parties hopefully will happen this time. A lot of times when you do have a contest between 2 conservatives, in this case, two folks who pretty much agree on most policy issues, people are going to make their choice, and then the party will unify. And let's hope that happens. Remember, for viewers, though, this number 2 Senate race that you're talking about is a special election that is a free-for-all, that anybody can run. A Libertarian could run, a Green could run, a Democrat, a Republican. So that's what makes it really dicey.
And it more than likely will head into a runoff, too. But, Janelle, you had said several times on this show that you wish it wouldn't have come to this, that Doug Collins would get into this race. So if you're a Republican, how do you pick a side? I mean, do you defy a popular governor and go with Doug Collins? Or do you, support the governor and go with Kelly Loeffler, especially if you're a state rep or a state senator wanting to get legislation through?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I think that we have to start by looking at it differently. So instead of looking at it like you're choosing between Congressman Collins and Senator Loeffler, you have to look at it like we're choosing based on timing and what's the best move for right now. Because, no pun intended, I know that the Super Bowl is this evening, but we are certainly in the Super Bowl of elections this year. And so everything matters. And at the time when we have so many elections that we have to win, we have no choice. I think that we do have to be mindful of what is going to keep us in the best position to win. And I personally think that, Congressman Collins jumping in the race right now is not necessarily the best timing for this. But I also think that, as long as we can keep the main thing, which is winning in November, I think we'll be okay.
So Theron, you're a Democratic strategist, so I know you're loving this. But let's talk about Kelly Loeffler. I've talked to a lot of Republicans this week who are really disappointed with her rollout. Her campaign commercials really haven't defined her. We really don't know why she truly wants to continue to stay in the U.S. Senate. There's no stronger supporter of President Trump than Doug Collins. So does she offer voters a little bit something different?
Well, I think you're going to see a shift in her campaign. I've heard some of the similar things that you've heard, Lori, but I also have heard that they've made a pivot to talk about her growing up on a farm in Illinois, and so they're definitely trying to appeal to some rural voters. I think that the ad that she has up now is definitely trying to really solidify her sort of conservative right position. I think it lacked a lot of biographical information, which typically what candidates do when they're trying to run for office. But I think that we can't understate this what Doug Collins has just done. I mean, Congressman Collins, we all know, wanted to be the pick from Governor Kemp. Governor Kemp with Kelly Loeffler, who he thought was going to appeal to college-educated, suburban, disaffected Republican women. And the first things out of the gate is that it was just a typical Republican playbook standard in her commercial ads. And so what's going to be really interesting now is with Congressman Collins in the race, who has been the chief defender and promoter of President Trump during this whole entire impeachment process. Will she maintain her position on the right, or will she do what we thought she was going to do? And she still has time. I mean, it's a long time to go. But maybe start trying to appeal to some of these women who we know are leaving the Republican Party every single day.
And Kathy, she does have time, and she does have a lot of Washington support now. I thought it was really telling. It was quite a statement from the Republican National Senatorial Committee calling Collins' decision short-sighted and selfish. We don't see that all too often. She'll definitely have the financial advantage. What do you think about that?
Well, that's probably why she's getting some of the endorsement she's getting, is just the assurance that there's kind of an open checkbook for getting her through what's going to be a very rough time. If she is successful in November and in December and however long, she's going to still have to come back a couple years later and do it again. But, you know, Collins is a conservative in record. You know, she's a conservative in ads. And I think that's going to be where she's going to have a big problem, no matter what the endorsements are.
There's one footnote to all of this, too, before we move on, and that is what is the role of President Trump? Because they're both pro-Trumpers. I've known Kelly Loeffler since 2013. I know her issues. She is a staunch conservative on all of the key issues. She and Doug Collins would vote just the same way. And Theron, you're right. We're going to have to see how this rolls out with the advertisements. But for now, President Trump is going to be neutral. And let's see if he is neutral by, say, March, when we be qualified.
I want to pose a question to Janelle, because I know you were going to speak. I mean, do you all not think that at the appropriate time, that when this trial is over, and many say that he will be acquitted because the jurists have already sort of stated that they're going to acquit him. When she's no longer a jurist on the trial, do you not think that he will come out and support Congressman Collins?
I don't know. I really don't know, because, like I said, it goes back to what's good for the state at this point. President Trump going into a re-election. After re-election, there's no more President Trump. So we have to look past this moment. So yes, Congressman Collins is a fan of the president, and he is really good at defending the president. But at what point are we going to kind of move past that? Because there are other issues that are at stake. And to talk about the women, really quick, just to talk about the women thing, I do want to highlight something, though. It seems like in a lot of her ads, well, not her ads, but a lot of articles, a lot of commercials, and a lot of social media posts refer to her as a Barbie doll, a mannequin, and all of these things. And as a woman who's in politics, we work extremely hard to be taken seriously. And I know we can all agree on that. And I think we have to be careful as to how we, put her out there. I mean, yes, she has a lot that she has to go through, but as a woman in general, we are being critiqued on everything, from appearance to how we communicate to all of those things. So I think giving her an opportunity to show who she is definitely necessary.
And I think one strategy that she's doing that I think is very effective is she's doing kind of these daily videos and daily updates where she's walking or she's on a train. That's the real Kelly Loeffler that we see. It's not that Kelly Loeffler that we hear reading off a script that we don't feel is genuine. So I think that's very effective for her.
That's a good point. And I would say, I think, Theron, you might agree with me on this. There's a couple other players in this dynamic along with the president. The president is going to be talking with Senate GOP leader Mitch McConnell and say, Mitch, what do you think here? And then David Perdue, our other U.S. Senator, of course, who's also up for re-election. Right now, in my opinion, he's the one that's kind of being the referee.
Well, he's been very quiet. And then, let's not underscore, listen, Congressman Collins, I'm telling you, you don't get any more conservative than him right now. And I believe that based on the numbers that I've seen, the person that drives up Republican base voters better than anyone in the country right now is President Trump. Now, don't underestimate Governor Kemp as well, but if I believe President Trump is going to engage in this race at the appropriate time, and you got two high-profile Republicans running against each other, and in the terms that you use, selfish, definitely shouldn't, run. I mean, that was some of the things that I've never heard Georgia Republicans use before about a fellow Republican entering an open race the way that we are now.
This was a national Republican that made that announcement, though.
But it's also, the polling in Georgia, 90% Republicans support President Trump. So really,
That's
I know
true,
you're
but
saying
both
he's not on the ballot, but
both
is
candidates.
he?
Now, there's also the factor of
In
the
the Senate
radicalism,
race.
the radicalism of the state Democratic Party. We're going to talk about this in a minute. Raphael Warnock is a radical.
Wait.
Ed
I got to have a
Carver
few
is a
minutes here,
moderate.
but I know we're sort of in a hurry. I
Okay,
got to
wait,
wrap
wait.
this up. But
And
remember,
so,
Kentucky, Louisiana, and Virginia did not go so well for candidates that were endorsed by the president. We've got a long way to go till November. We have a president that is a loose cannon.
Who won
under
in
the best of
2016? Who won the
circumstances.
presidency in 2016?
I'm talking
Let her
about who won
finish,
last
and
year.
that
16's a
is
whole other year.
A wonderful segue to our next block where we will look at the Democrats in Senate race number 2. Stay tuned.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
Let's switch gears and move over to Democrats in Senate race number 2. A huge and perhaps expected announcement from the Reverend Raphael Warnock of Ebenezer Baptist Church. He's in for the U.S. Senate.
I see this as an extension of the work that I've been doing for years. My whole life really has been about service, about answering the call. Dr. King used to say that life's most pressing question is, what are you doing for others?
Now, some of those same Republicans I talked to admitted that this was how you enter a race. Reverend Warnock talked about growing up in the projects in Savannah, how he made it, but he also talked about the issues that he would fight for: health care, raising the minimum wage. He clearly has the gift of oratory. Kathy, he has the backing of Stacey Abrams. So does he automatically move to front-runner status on the Democratic side?
On the Democratic side, absolutely. Absolutely. He's solidly there. That's not going to change over time. I think he's kind of leading from a really good platform, and she's going to be there for him right to the very end. So I think that's a solid endorsement and probably the best one you could have.
Theron, are there room for any more Democrats to enter this race then?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we always hear is that it's never too late in politics. And I think that I agree with Kathy. Having the endorsement of Stacey Abrams definitely makes him the front runner with the current slate of candidates. But if you really just look at this from an analytical standpoint, you see all the sort of running to the right on the Republican side with Senator Loeffler and Congressman Collins. I think it's undefined just yet of whether Raphael Warnock is going to be a moderate or a sort of progressive wing of the party. I think Lieberman is more progressive. Ed Tarver's kind of middle. So the thing I want to just really say for our viewers, in this jungle primary as it currently in its current form, the middle is wide open right now because you have the right and the left. And again, Raphael Warnock has an opportunity to define himself, but I do think that there is an opportunity for a moderate Democrat, he or she, to enter the race and kind of own that space in the middle that is missing right now.
But let me ask you, I mean, it worked for Stacey Abrams to be a little bit further left. Is that kind of the strategy that he will use in the Senate race?
Well, I think Stacey Abrams will tell you. I mean, a lot of Republicans this week have been talking about how left she was, but let's not forget, this is the same candidate for governor who put former Governor Deal in her ads. And so there was a robust attempt to really appeal to the middle. I mean, she talked about working with Republicans and some of the moderate things. Now, what happened towards the end of that race is what's going to happen to whoever the person emerges in both Senate races, is the Republicans are going to spend enormous amount of money. I'm talking about hundreds of millions of dollars to really define these Democratic candidates as socialists. And so, again, I believe that having the support of Stacey Abrams is big, but there's still an opportunity there for Democrats to really speak to people in the middle. And I think right now we don't have that person on both sides.
Phil, he's going to stay on as the Reverend for Ebenezer Baptist Church, as the preacher for Ebenezer Baptist Church. We have this thing called the Johnson Amendment. Will he be so closely watched about his message from the pulpit? Well,
he will. In fact, all pastors and clergymen and women have to be watched because of the IRS rules, and you can't be campaigning with church money and on church property and that type of thing. I do think, though, that Theron and I think all of us agree that the centrist voters, independent voters, moderates, whatever you want to call them, do decide these elections. This is tricky. I don't think Warnock can walk back a lot of his radical stances. He's for open borders. There's videos of him with his fiery sermons. He's against the voter ID. He's attacked Brian Kemp as the architect of fraud and voter suppression, which is an absolute lie. And so Ed Tarver, though, to your point, Theron, could take some middle ground. He's an African American. He's a more traditional liberal Democrat who's reasonable, in my opinion, over in Augusta. And so that shows the bitter split between the hard left socialists and more moderates.
So, Janelle, let me ask you this. Because this is a jungle election and there are no party primaries, do Loeffler and Collins go after each other, or do they start going after Warnock?
That's interesting. I don't think they have to go after Warnock. I think he's going to go after himself, because here's my challenge, and this goes back to what you were saying about having Governor Deal in Stacey Abrams' commercial. It's one thing to have Republican friends, another thing to push Republican policy, right? So, or to support Republican policy. And what's going to be interesting to me is that as a pastor, to see how far left he actually goes. Because when it comes to pro-choice and abortion, when it comes to, removing, prayer out of schools and all these things, what are going to be your talking points when it comes to that? And then not to mention, I also feel like in his ad, he said something in his ad that I thought was really interesting. He said, "I believe what makes America so great is that we always had a path to make it greater," which to me is a long way of saying, let's make America great again. So I don't think we really have to worry. So I don't think we really have to worry too much about that. I think that Loeffler and Collins should just focus on being effective for the state, and I think that'll get them far.
But for our viewers, real quick, and I want to let Kathy, allow Kathy to jump in here, is let's not forget that Congressman Doug Collins is a pastor as well. And so let's not have a double standard, guys.
He was a military chaplain.
Okay. But last time I checked,
just always like to clarify that.
He's not preaching right now at church.
Yeah, he's not preaching right now. But what I don't want this conversation to morph into that a pastor of any church that preaches the gospel for any religion shouldn't have the opportunity to have a fair process to enter the world of politics.
Absolutely.
And I think we got to be very careful about the language and the tone that we use, because at the end of the day, I think that what he also talked about in his ad is that he's a man of faith. And he truly believes that God has called him to want to run for U.S. Senate. And so I don't want to underscore the process that I think he's still taking with not only his family, but also with his church congregation to really kind of explain why he feels that he's doing what he's doing right now.
Kathy?
Well, I think the Democrats really benefited in getting to go second on this. And I think what we're going to see is whoever builds the biggest coalition wins at least the first round. This is a nonpartisan primary. I kind of prefer that term over jungle primary. And whoever comes in there with the biggest coalition is going to be in the runoff. And there will be a runoff given how much money is going to be spent and other kinds of things. Then it's going to be about who can turn people out in the dead of December, and that's going to be the hard part.
Well, and there was a lot of talk that maybe, there wouldn't be this jungle election, that they would actually have primaries. It looks like that bill isn't going anywhere this session for this particular election, and maybe for next year. Darren, you might be hearing differently.
It passed out of committee. It was sent back to rules because they want to clarify some language in there that applies to legislative races as well. And so there's a lot of chatter at the Capitol about that. But let's just hypothetically say the bill passes. I'm not saying it will. I'm not on either side of it. But then I think you have people who have run statewide before on the Republican side and the Democratic side that may reconsider this based on the qualifying date.
Right. What we're talking about is a bill that would make party primaries in May, and it would remove this special election. Yeah. But I don't think that's going to. I think they may make it for 2021 if they're going to do it.
I think a lot of people are saying you can't change the rules in the middle of the game, but so we'll see. Well, coming up, the FAA is asking for more documents regarding the investigation into Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. We'll discuss straight ahead.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
According to the AJC, the Federal Aviation Administration issued a second subpoena in an investigation that Hartsfield-Jackson International unlawfully diverted airport funds to the city of Atlanta. Phil, there's a focus now on this law firm, Paul Hastings.
Yes, Paul Hastings was retained by the city to do all of this work, millions of dollars of work. It's outrageous. They have no records that the FAA wants. And so, again, the second subpoena, get a load of this, $900 an hour for these attorneys. There's no explanation as to what all of this was for, $700 for their associate attorneys. There's no backup data for their invoices. No engagement letter has ever been produced by City Hall. Again, the stench of corruption rears its head again. It's just another example of why we should have a statewide takeover of this airport that's controlled by a corrupt City Hall.
Kathy, I usually go to Theron, but now that you're here, we'll turn to you on this. As a former Atlanta City Council president, what did you think of all of this?
Well, I was going with you on the stench of corruption, but then when you went right off the runway, I decided I left you there.
No pun intended.
No,
Right?
yeah, I don't know.
Runway,
You know, this is serious. You know, the investigation continues. Each time someone gets nailed, more information comes out as people try to shorten their sentences or do whatever it is they're doing. And, you know, this is horrible precedent. And, you know, my hope is that the mayor gets ahead of this. She needs to be the one leading this cleanup, you know, as opposed to letting it just sort of dribble out.
We've been saying this for 2 years to get ahead of it. Nothing's happened. No inspector can stop this either.
Yeah, well, like I said, you know, in politics, you never want somebody else delivering the bad news. If you can be controlling your own bad news, it's going to be a lot more helpful. But we're going to see trials coming up in the next couple of months, and folks are going to start singing. And I think this is sort of, you know, a little bit more of that.
Okay, we should say that you did run for mayor. So
I did, and,
yes.
and you know, and I want to just say, I'm going to criticize where I think that something needs to be done, but I think you've seen that I've been fair. I'm not picking a bone here.
That's why we brought you on the show.
Because when I think the mayor's doing a good thing, I'm going to say it.
Theron, do you want to weigh in on this?
I mean, you guys know what I'm going to say. I mean, I think that, again, to say that this mayor hasn't been proactive about cleaning up corruption in City Hall is just blatantly false. I mean, I don't need to tell our viewers week in week what she did the day she stepped in office. She's been cooperating with council trying to move this forward. She created this IG position. She created an open checkbook. But let me just get to this FAA report. For our viewers, the first subpoena that was sent, it was regarding jet fuel. And it was uncovering, you know, records about whether or not money was used for jet fuel. And I just want to say for our viewers that the city of Atlanta does not purchase jet fuel for airlines. Airlines purchase their own jet fuel. So now what has happened with this second subpoena, which is ongoing, when you're trying to investigate and get to the bottom of something, I mean, it's not unheard of to have subpoenas. And so now what they're looking at is, again, a deeper dive into how this money was spent. And so I think the mayor is definitely taking the lead on this. You know, she definitely authorized her law department to go full cooperation with this federal investigation. So I think at the end of the day, the mayor really wants to put this behind her. I mean, that's why she's turning over the documents at an unprecedented rate and making sure that transparency is at the front of her agenda.
But the documents are missing.
Well, there's a process of maybe one or two documents, Phil. So documents, plural, is maybe one or two of really waiting for the people that were involved to turn over these documents.
What does the mayor just say? This is wrong. Paul Hastings ripped off the taxpayers of the city of Atlanta. Let's be real here.
No, I think she has definitely said that what transpired is not something that she will allow to go forward. So she immediately stopped their engagement in its current form, and she wants to do an investigation. Now, Phil, if I had a choice between, you know, wanting to go by what you're saying, and you're not a lawyer versus a lawyer who's the mayor of Atlanta, I think I'm going to side with the mayor of Atlanta who's a lawyer. So I think
anyone who's not a lawyer is ignorant and doesn't know what they're talking about. That's ridiculous.
I'm just saying to you.
That's ridiculous.
I'm just saying.
City money was diverted. I can read and I can file open records
I'm
requests.
not a lawyer, but I'm not going to come on the show and appear
city
to be
money,
a legal
city
expert.
money has been diverted. All of us talk to lawyers all the time as we prep for this show.
Okay.
And I tell you what, you defending Paul Hastings is a disgrace.
I didn't defend Paul Hastings. I'm defending the mayor.
Oh, now
Well, you're going to wrap
here
it there because we don't have time to talk about the sign of the changing times in Gwinnett County. Sheriff Butch Conway says he won't run for re-election after serving for more than 2 decades. Maybe we'll get to that next week. So after this, winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
I didn't want to feel like I cut you off there, and so we'll start with you.
No, it's totally fine. My first winner is going to be Rose Scott and Dennis O'Hare. You may remember they started the program Closer Look 5 years ago, so they celebrated 5 years. Rose Scott does an excellent job on that radio broadcast. Also, I ran into Ellen and Rick Glassberg in the Cobb County Schools. Ellen works there, and they're big fans of the show. They live in Ackworth, so definitely want to give them a shout out. And then lastly is we lost people in the helicopter crash. Definitely Kobe Bryant and Gigi Bryant and the other people who passed away. So I just want to offer my condolences to all of the families that were, gone too soon. A legend, basketball player. I'm a huge Kobe fan. Mama of life. I mean, it's just a tragic ending to his life.
Gosh, it hit all of us so hard too. So thanks. All right, Phil.
Well, you are right about Kobe. I've got a winner just this past week, Sam Massell, former mayor of Atlanta, 92 years old. He's also president of the Buckhead Coalition, which he's done a lot for that commercial section of Atlanta. Stepping down as president, that was a big deal. So best wishes to him. He likes to go on cruises, so he'll be cruising.
I think he's 92 years young.
92 years young. Okay, thank you. Is that the politically correct term?
No, I just think that that's how you can define him.
And you know, there's a Marietta City official, Reggie Copeland. If you look at the video, and I don't like any public official that is stopped by the police for an infraction and says, "You don't know who I am." Well, that's what happened. He got off very light by a judge. He should have been charged with disorderly conduct and obstruction of. It took 25 minutes to arrest him. He wouldn't get out of his car. Anyhow, big loser, Reggie Copeland. You mentioned Sheriff Butch Conway. He's my winner. He was a great law enforcement officer. Hate to see him retire, but best wishes to him.
All right, Janelle, the clock is counting down.
Okay, absolutely. So really quickly, my two winners are actually Democrats. I know I have two Democrats that win, so I don't hate Democrats. But Commissioner Joe Karn did a census, a nonpartisan census town hall that I thought was really effective, and that was awesome. And then Commissioner Felicia Warner, also, she's a friend of mine, and I attended her event last Thursday. And I like to hear what's happening with the schools that are happening in Clayton County. Everything is positive. So
good, Kathy.
DeKalb County Commissioner Kathy Gannon has announced that she's not running again, and I think we ought to give her a shout out for 15 years of hard work on the DeKalb County Commission. And I'll go with my loser. I think the governor's the loser. I think his budget is a mess. Well, hopefully next week we can go into some detail about how messy it is, but I don't think he's had a good week with Doug Collins in the race and his Medicaid expansion being shut down in a study and teacher raises when it comes out that local jurisdictions are going to have to pay 40% of that. There's going to be something to pay.
All right, well, that's a wrap. Great show today. Thanks, guys. And we will see everybody again next week. Thanks for watching.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.